Mom, brother, cat's there too. Okay, all right. Dear Jesus, thank you for this day. Help me to get through this final smoothly, and help me to present it clearly and not stutter as much, and help me to finish it good, and may the video upload good and not have any problems with that. Amen. Hello everyone. Today I will be presenting to you all a case in which I believe that it is not ethically wrong to lie for a good cause. First, I believe that it is important to define what morals and ethics are. Morals are default standards of a congregation or an area. These morals can be good or bad depending on the situation. Ethics are generally defined as default standards that everybody knows that are usually exclusively good. I can understand why lying is debated amongst people a lot to determine if it is ethically a good or bad thing to do. The general answer that you receive when asking this question, is it good or bad to lie for a good cause, is that lying is almost always associated with something bad. Examples of lying to parents, friends, families, co-workers, teachers, etc. Some people respond to this by saying it all really just depends on the context of the situation. But there is a new perspective that I wish to show you all that some of you may have not yet considered. People do not dislike lying just because it is dishonest or because it creates extra steps or because it's a nuisance to the person, although these are definite factors that portray into why people hate lying. But another reason why people hate lying is because lying is a tool that is used for people when they're in trouble to protect themselves from getting into more trouble or to get into trouble in the first place. Another way that you can define protecting oneself from trouble or doing actions that benefit yourself and not others is to be selfish. I believe that it is not a secret that morally nobody likes a selfish person, even if the person is trying to be selfish for the benefit of others. With that being said, if you are manipulating the truth for unselfish reasons to protect and defend others, are you being selfish? No, of course not. Lying to protect somebody from harm while also risking your life at the same time sounds heroic for that moment in time. And it should not be frowned upon simply because you are bending the truth. What I notice is that some people really don't care for context. They only believe what is written on paper and take it to heed. One good example of this are Quakers. One of the core beliefs that Quakers take with them and live by is that they frown upon any kind of dishonesty, even if it's a small little lie that is insignificant to the world, like, are you fat? Or, you don't look fat, but they really are fat. I personally disagree with this narrative because, as I said, lying without having selfish intentions or benefiting from any gain is still lying, yes, but for a good cause. What I notice about the Bible, in contrast to Quaker beliefs, is that it tends to lean to the historical grammatical method, or HGM, which is using the context of the story to determine the meaning behind an action, rather than using the historical critical method, which is just taking the verse as it is, or historical critical method also means HCM. You can see this a lot in Bible stories. The first story that comes to mind is Rahab. Rahab helped two Israelite spies hide from Jericho officials and lied when officials came to her door and asked if she knew where they were. Thanks to her efforts, the spies were able to get back to the Israelites and ended up destroying Jericho, while she and her family received safe passage. In the Bible, Rahab is considered the hero of the story, even though she lied. Why should Rahab be frowned upon for protecting God's plan, even if she did bend the truth a little bit? She wasn't bending the truth to protect herself, she was bending it to protect others. Something else that a lot of people argue is that lying is frowned upon by God because it says you shouldn't lie in the Ten Commandments. But I believe that it is much more deeper than that. While using the historical grammatical method, if you look at the text in which the Ten Commandments are listed, it says, quote, it never says, quote, thou shalt not lie. It doesn't say that. Instead, in every version of the Bible, it says, quote, thou shalt not bear false witness. Bearing false witness in the Bible is very different than just lying. Bearing false witness in the Bible refers to the act of being dishonest with the intention of doing harm to others. Now, people might come back at me at this and tell me, well, this just proves Rahab wrong for lying because she bore false witness, since her lie kept the spies alive, her alive, and her family alive, while at the same time destroying Jericho and ultimately killing everyone else inside the city of Jericho. Wrong. Bearing false witness is still a dishonest action for a selfish reason, to ruin someone else's life for your own conscience or pleasure. This is where the context and HGM are very important. Rahab doesn't lie with the intention of hurting others. In fact, she does quite the opposite. Her action of lying was only to protect the lives of the spies. If you look at what she says in the story, in the words, she only bends the truth about the spies' location. The act of bearing false witness doesn't apply here because her lie would have needed to include her want for her and her family's safe passage, and also her wants for the killing of all the people in the city of Jericho. She only mentions wanting safe passage and being selfish after the lie has been said. So was she being selfish? Yes. But was she being selfish while in the process of lying? No. So Rahab is technically an exception from bearing false witness here. Some people also bring up the fact that the Bible says in Proverbs 16:7 that, quote, the Lord dislikes a lying tongue. But again, this is where HGM is incredibly important. Just a few verses later, in verse 19, it says, quote, a false witness who pours out lies and a person who stores up conflict in the community. Again, God is not saying from this verse that he hates all form of dishonesty. He says he only hates dishonesty that causes harm to others, that also selfishly benefits the liar. Another example I wish to use is Corrie ten Boom and the Holocaust. Corrie ten Boom is a woman who hid Jews from the Nazis during World War II. Every time Nazi soldiers would bang on her door and ask if she had seen any Jews, she always lied and said she never saw any, while at the same time she was hoarding over 800 of them. This is a great example of lying without being selfish. Back then, the punishment for being caught hoarding Jews was that you suffered the same fate as the Jews, usually the death camps or immediate execution on sight. So Corrie knew that there was indeed a severe punishment and that her life was on the line. But she continued to lie and save the lives of 800 Jews that she hid. I find it very hard to believe that people like Quakers, and likewise of other people that believe like Quakers, will frown upon situations like this and would rather that she had just told the truth and let the 800 people die to protect the ethics of this world. Something else that people point out is, well, what about the stories where Abraham lies about his wife's identity to protect himself and her from harm? Now, people might come at me and say that this comeback I'm about to explain to you is very cheap and very lazy, but it is true. If God is sending you on a mission where you are to make more of your kind, and it's truly a God mission and not your own delusional mission, I believe that you have every right to protect yourself, and that God will protect yourself if you can't physically do it yourself for you, even if it means at the expense of others, who usually, in the stories, 9 out of 10, deserve it. I mean, what are we going to do? Start questioning God since he struck down the Egyptian army to save the Israelites? Because I believe that we all agree that killing is bad, right? But are we going to get mad at God now because he is now protecting his people? Another story that I would like to mention is Ananias. Ananias lied about what he was planning to give back to God and ended up paying for it with his life. I believe that this story is the definitely very exaggerated punishment, but a good example of what God feels like when you lie to protect yourself and your selfish desires. I am not saying in any way that God will take your life and strike you down because you lied to be selfish, but I think this story definitely shows God's definite disdain for selfish lying. Something I believe that we should talk about is the movement Make Christianity Great Again, or MCGA. When we talk about making Christianity great again, your mind probably jumps to MAGA, Make America Great Again. What both of these have in common is saying that great again means that at some point in time, whatever you are referencing was once great, powerful, and influential. There are many different aspects that show how our church is going to be soft and less harsh in disagreeing with people who openly do whatever the opposite of God tells them to do. There are aspects of areas of Christianity that are slowly starting to fade away due to custom changes. One of these changes is our ethics. Our ethics have drastically changed over the years, and one thing I do want to mention about MCGA is why confusing, quote, a right to do with, quote, what's right to do is very bad within the context of lying. A right to do in the context of lying, to me, is simply just having the free will to choose whether you want to lie or not, whether you want to be selfish or not. What's right to do refers to the ethics behind your actions and if they are morally right or wrong. When referring to MCGA, the whole goal of the role is to reboot our ethics and morals to a higher standard. So if we were rebooting our morals, doesn't this mean it affects why we lie? If our conscious ability is to determine how we should lie, how we should lie comes from our morals, according to MCGA, keeping our ethics and morals high will help us recognize that lying for personal gain is bad, and that we should be able to distinguish the difference between lying to protect others versus lying to protect ourselves. In conclusion, I believe that lying is very dependent on the context of the story, but it is never ethically wrong to lie if your intentions are not selfish and they are designed to help others. Yes, being dishonest will always raise an eyebrow, but if it is for the protection of others, has an ethical and moral reason to back your lie up, and you don't lie with intention of anything good happening to you that you specifically state in your lie, it is indeed ethical to lie for a good cause. Thank you.